And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
Eric writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com on the subject of 911 ridiculous. This was a long time ago, I think 2004. I just moved to Valley Village. I had a turn arrow and a guy ran the red and almost hit me. He didn't like my horn and started to shout like he was going to kill me, so he started chasing me. I dialed 911 on my cell and it rang forever. Then an automated pickup where I was on hold for 10 minutes while speeding to get away from the nut job before someone came on the line. I later learned that there was a police station a block away from where I was circling, so I should have just driven directly there.
That seems to be the way to get the problem solved.
Yeah.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number. A family in Eagle Rock saw their home burn to the ground, in part because 911 didn't answer their call. When they called 911, they were sent to voicemail. If it weren't for a neighbor physically going to the fire station and alerting firefighters, the firefighters would have never shown up. The firefighters are so appalled at what's going on with 911, they're feeding these stories to the news. I want to know if you've had to call 911 and had a totally ridiculous response. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Let's begin with Max in San Francisco. Max, hello.
Hi there. I'm actually calling from Tijuana by the Bay. It used to be called San Francisco. My girlfriend and I had been walking along. We're about 30 yards from a grocery store, corner grocery store. A drive-by shooter comes by, shoots. I call 911. I get English, Chinese, Spanish, and some other languages, and then I had to wait on hold for 10 minutes while all this recycled. So when I finally spoke to an officer, the guy was long gone, and we had ducked into an alley, and nothing ever came of it, and it was a complete waste of time. Or I was just lucky that we weren't killed.
How frustrated were the cops when you told the cops about your experience with 911?
Well, he was very frustrated because, he was trying to get a description. I said, but, they're long gone. I could barely get a description. We ducked into an alley just to make sure we weren't going to hit by open fire. And, of course, the cop was very frustrated. I spoke to a cop later in the grocery store and said, well, that's the way it is right now. And I said, yeah, it's not very good, is it? Well, welcome to Biden's America is what was happening.
Well, I have some advice for you, sir, if you want to avoid this from happening again in the future. Shop at a different grocery store than 50 Cent.
Well, this is right in my neighborhood, a catty corner from where I live, and they've been that problem has been solved. People have worked to get it out of here, but it was quite scary.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're okay and in one piece. Thank you so much for the call, sir. Let's go to Gary in San Rafael. Gary, hello.
Hi. A few years back, I had a rental property in Vallejo that was temporarily empty, and I was having some work done on it. So I'd go out there every morning, and I'd go out there and find that it's broken into, and they've stolen all my contractor's tools. And I called 911, and I got a message saying that unless my life is in danger or the crime is actually in progress, I needed to call a different number. And then the kicker is, while I'm standing there, a neighbor comes over, and he had taken a picture, a video, and got the license plate number of the people backing out of the driveway and all the rest of it. So I called the police with that information and offered to forward it to him. And, oh, no, can't do that. You have to come down to the station and fill out a bunch of paperwork. So that's Vallejo for you.
Oh, my God. I guess Oakland telling people to fill out the form online is not something that's unique to them. It looks like it's going on all over.
Yes, sir. That's exactly what happened.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Steve in Pinole. Steve, hello.
Hi. Really like your program. One of the best ones I get to listen to. But about 25 years ago, I was on Highway 4, which goes from Concord over to the Bay. And on a Friday evening, came across a traffic accident. There was a roadside phone, might have been to the CHP. I had no answer for well over 10 minutes. So I finally just quit and went home because nobody was answering.
And that's what I think a lot of people do. It's one thing if your house is on fire, you have to figure something out. Whether you, I guess, send someone to the fire station or find a different phone number to call, you have to figure it out because if you don't put the fire out, you're going to lose everything you own. But if you're calling to report something that happened to someone else who's not you, and it's not going to really impact your life one way or another, and 911 is making it difficult, the path of least resistance is just to move on.
Well,
All right.
That's what I did.
I understand, sir.
That's what I did. I had nothing else I could do.
Thank you for the call. Let's go to Jeff in Monterey. Jeff, hello.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, we'll make a short story long. I was driving to Sacramento. It's been a couple of years, but I was on Highway 5 out by, I think it's Twin Cities, quite a few miles before I got to Sacramento. And I reported a drunk driver. He was all over the road, whatnot. And he said, okay. And then the guy would slow down, and I would end up going past him. And then I could see him coming again. And it's like I went 10 miles, and next thing I know, I called 911 again, or I probably went more than 10 miles. But anyway, I called him again, and they said, okay. And then went another 20 minutes or so, getting closer to maybe Pocket Road, coming into Sacramento, and where the concrete walls are, up on both sides of the highway. And the guy literally, as I'm talking to 911, he swerved over, and you can see all these sparks. And I'm telling the 911 operator, no, he just hit a wall. And then he gets back, and like, okay. And then nothing happens, and I get all the way past the 80, 50, where I was actually going to turn, but I see this guy still on the highway, and I'm just scared he's just going to, something bad is going to happen. And I call him again, and they tell me, no, we see that you've already called, and I can tell they're getting frustrated at me. And then I go another all the way through Sacramento, and still nothing. I call, and then they accuse me of, now, are you following this guy? Or if you are, and they just started giving me a rush and a crap about that. So anyway, that was my story. And then I end up, this guy took an exit out by Garden Road or somewhere. And when he takes the exit, he just comes to a stop. He turns right, and he gets in the left-hand turn lane and stops just like he's driving fine and turns left. And that's where I finally said, okay, they never did pull him over for 30, 40 some miles. And it was on a regular Wednesday night.
And they just regarded you as the problem and not him.
Apparently, yeah, because I called him multiple times. Yeah. And I never, so I just, every time I hear these advertises, report a drunk driver, and years before that, I had done that over in Santa Cruz, and it was from like Watsonville to Santa Cruz, and I never saw I'd only called once, but I saw the guy was on, and I never saw any response there either. So this is only the second time in my lifetime. I'm 71 years old, but yeah, no, it was. I was like, should you really report a drunk driver, to the highway, to the 911, or what's the deal with them,
Well, thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate it. I guess if 911 won't do anything about it, you could report him to Captain Morgan. You could put him in the brig. Let's go to Fred in Menlo Park. Fred, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Okay. So we, my wife and I went up to Palace of the Legion of Honor in San Francisco, the museum. This is about a year and a half ago. We pulled up parked the car and got out, and we're walking in, and we saw two kids pull up in this car really fast. Both jumped out, broke a window in a car that was parked there, out-of-state plates, and were going through the back of it. So I called 911. I got picked up real fast. That was the good news. The bad news was they said, "What's going on?" I said, "I'm watching two kids. They just broke a window in a car. They're going through the back seat, taking stuff out." They said, "That's really not an emergency. We'll patch you over to a local police station." So about 5 minutes later, local police station picked up, and they asked us what was going on. The car was gone by then. They said, "There's really nothing we can do about this kind of stuff. So thank you very much for the info." And that was the end of it. Now,
so they literally didn't care.
They did not care. We got inside the museum, talked to the guard that was standing in the front of the building, and said, "Hey, we just saw a break-in out in the parking lot. They got away with looked like a backpack or two." And he said, "Did you call 911?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "They do anything?" I said, "No." He said, "Yeah, that happens about 3 or 4 times a week up here."
Oh, boy.
Note to self, do not rent a car in San Francisco or bring your car into the city. Uber it or Waymo it everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thanks for the call, sir. Let's go to Mike in San Jose. Mike, hello.
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
If I call 911, if someone breaks in my house and I call 911 and they put me on hold, whoever's coming in is going to think it sounds like 4th of July. And they better duck. I'm going to be shooting.
Well, this is what people are being forced to do. If you're taught to call 911 when there's an emergency and you call 911 and they send you to voicemail or they tell you it's not an actual emergency, then people are going to handle it on their own.
Yep. And then they'll come after them for protecting their house and their family.
Most likely. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Fitz, in San Jose. Fitz, hello.
Hi, guys. Hey, love the show. And my ex-wife is a 911 dispatch for the sheriff's department. And I called her one time to report a fire in my pants, and she hung up on me.
Thank you for the call, sir. Well, Randy, I think I told you about my big experience with 911 when I was coming back from Las Vegas, didn't I?
Oh, yeah. Remind everybody.
Okay. So when you drive to Las Vegas from Southern California, you have a couple of different options. You can either take the 15 all the way there. It's a freeway that runs north through Victorville and Barstow and Baker and those areas, and it'll take you right into the state of Nevada. However, if you want to go what's known as the back way, you can do that, where you go through 29 Palms and Yucca Valley and Kelso and Amboy and that area. And in between the train station in the middle of nowhere, which is in Kelso, and State Line, which is Prim, there's an area called SEMA, which is probably the most rural part of the drive between Southern California and Southern Nevada. In SEMA, there's no cell reception at all. There are no convenience stores. There are no fast food joints. There is nothing out there. It's literally barren desert. If I were to take you out there at night and tell you you were on the surface of the moon, you would believe me. It's that kind of place. So I was driving back from Las Vegas one Monday morning, and I was in SEMA, and I saw an overturned car. And there was another motorist who stopped to render aid. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I have no medical training. There's nothing I can do if I stop and try to help this person out. What would make me useful is to get 911 on the line and send out some paramedics or firefighters, EMTs, whatever. The problem is you can't use your cell phone there. I know it says SOS on your phone and it's supposed to work in the case of an emergency. Let me tell you, it doesn't. And in the middle of nowhere out there in SEMA, there is an abandoned convenience store that had a pink payphone outside of the convenience store. And I thought, okay, I know where that pink payphone is. I'm going to drive the 20 miles to the pink payphone and call 911, which I did. What I learned was, and I thought, if you called 911 from a payphone, they had your address in the system. They had your address on the computer. That didn't happen out there. And I wasn't sent to a call center in Barstow, which is probably the nearest city. They sent me to some call center someplace else. And I kept trying to explain to the person where I was, because you're literally in the middle of nowhere. And if they're not familiar with that area, they have no clue what you're talking about. You might as well talk to them in a different language. And after a period of time, I realized, wait a minute, I'm not talking to someone in Barstow. I'm talking to someone somewhere else. And I asked them to transfer me to Barstow, which they did. And the moment they did that, the operator in Barstow knew exactly what I was talking about and sent an emergency responder immediately. The emergency responder got there. Some days later, they called me up and let me know that no one had called 911 until me, and that they were able to get there in time, and that the woman survived the accident. She's okay. Fast forward to the next time I'm driving to Las Vegas, and I figured, let's hope that there's some kind of map on the payphone where they let you know exactly where you are, what coordinates the payphone is located at. So if there's some kind of problem, you don't have to play a game of charades and tell the person to take their cell phone out and to look on the map and try to figure out what you're describing to them. Instead, what I found was they ripped the payphone out. Now there's no payphone in SEMA. So if something happens, you're on your own. And I remember telling the operator, you really need to make sure that there's some sort of indicator here where you are, so you don't have to play this game when it happens again, because it will happen again. And their response was to just rip the whole thing out. What are you going to do? Let's go to Larry in Wilmington. Larry, hello.
Hey, John. My name's Larry. 8 years ago, I was on Figueroa near 135th Street in unincorporated Los Angeles. And as I was driving, a crazy illegal alien with no driver's license, no insurance, came flying around, making an illegal turn, and hit me at the 1 to 2 o'clock hour, close to head on. I was going 35 miles an hour. I don't know how fast this guy was going. Destroyed my car, my Lexus. Destroyed my body. People helped me out of the car. I was laying on the side in the middle of the road. This impact pushed me from the middle fast lane all the way over to oncoming traffic the other way. People dragged me out of harm's way. I called 911 or 911, and the people kept saying, "Sir, the police here are not going to respond. They're not going to respond."
Even after that?
Oh, my God. That's about as bad as it gets. Thank you for the call, sir. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, with the end of the show quickly approaching, if you want to listen to us all weekend long, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can do what George Gascon does to himself in the middle of the night.
Do a Google on YouTube.
Or get one of our apps, the KABC app, the KSFO app. Easiest ways to listen to these stations live and download all the podcasts. Be extra safe out there this weekend while listening to our podcasts. And for God's sakes, don't launch fireworks in the middle of a local news report.
Emergency services, dangerously thin.
Instead of lighting bombs, if you're in Fresno, you can listen to us on Saturdays.
Every Saturday from 2 to 3, catch the Fix California Hour replay on KMJ in Fresno, covering the whole Central Valley. 580 on the AM dial, 105.9 on the FM dial. First time we're on an FM station, Johnny. That's pretty cool. And you can listen live on that stream, kmjnow.com, every Saturday from 2 to 3.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the founder of Golden Together. He was also a host on the Fox News Channel, which you watched on the weekends for many moons over on cable news. You can also follow him on X at Steve Hilton X, and he's now also a candidate for governor here in the state of California. Steve Hilton, welcome.
Well, it's great to be with you, John, but honestly, you cannot play that George Gascon thing just before I come on. How could I keep a straight face after that? That is brilliant. I hadn't heard it before, but it's put me right off my stride, so somehow you're going to have to get me back on track.
Do a Google on YouTube.
You can make it your ringtone at the barbecue tomorrow. So, Steve, it's been quite a day already because it's a long weekend. It's a 3-day weekend, the July 4th weekend. And you wake up this morning and you find out that the stock market is exploding because of the jobs numbers. The jobs numbers that were supposed to be anemic, that cable, particularly CNN and MSNBC, had been predicting would fall far below what Donald Trump would like to see, didn't happen. The numbers were beyond fantastic. The stock market then responded by exploding. The stock market is doing great. Later on in the morning, they take the vote in Washington, D.C. for the big, beautiful bill, and Speaker Mike Johnson and Donald Trump were able to whip up the votes that they needed to get that bill over the finish line before the July 4th holiday break, which was the deadline that he said he wanted to get that bill finished by. What do you make of everything that we saw this morning?
I think it's just the latest installment in an absolutely stunning first 6 months of this Trump presidency that's just completely exceeded anyone's expectations, which were already pretty high. I always said that I was very confident that President Trump would win this second time, and I always said that when he wins and he's in his second term, you're going to see the best version of Trump. He'll have nothing left to prove politically. He'll have completely confounded all the critics and all the people that tried to take him down, and he's just going to be completely in his element, with swagger and strength and confidence and just getting it all done. And that's what we've seen in the last 6 months. And this is really the icing on the cake. And it was just, I think, inevitable, because are they really going to say, these Republicans in Congress, that the man who led them to victories in both chambers, because they all came in on his coattails, they wouldn't have a majority without him, the man who won the popular vote, all 7 swing states, totally dominates the Republican Party, more popular among the party than any Republican president in living memory, that they're going to defy him and not pass his signature agenda, and on top of that, as a consequence, deliver the biggest tax increase in American history. Of course, that wasn't going to happen. So I always felt that it would happen, but I was on late last night with Trace Gallagher, and it looked as if these idiots who were just holding things up, might string it out. So something happened overnight. It's fantastic, and it's just the kind of energy that we need to take us into the next 6 months of the Trump presidency. The final point I'd make is that, usually with these politicians and new presidents, we talk about the first 100 days. Trump just doesn't care. Every period is going to be the first 100 days of this presidency. He's just going all out to really not waste this opportunity he was given, and it's just magnificent to see.
Sometimes when you see people who are very good at what they do, that's one thing. Where if you are solo, you're an expert at your craft and you can produce great results. However, when you take someone who's really good at what they do sometimes and you pair them up with another person who's really good at what they do, sometimes you get to the level of magic. We saw that with Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. You saw that with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. What do you make of this relationship that exists now between President Trump and Speaker Mike Johnson? And I say that because one of the things that Donald Trump didn't have his first term was a capable speaker. He had Speaker Paul Ryan, who was working against his agenda. The second time, or the second half, I guess I should say, he had Kevin McCarthy, who just wasn't an honest or trustworthy person, had a very difficult time counting votes when it came down to the wire, and really was more of a problem than a contributor for Donald Trump. But now Mike Johnson is there. He has someone he can depend on and count on, and oh my God, they're producing magic.
Oh, it's amazing. I totally agree. And I've been saying that all along. I've met the speaker a couple of times. The last time, I believe it was a fundraiser that we were both doing for Scott Bohr in Orange County. And he's just a really, really incredible person. He's just got this wonderful way about him, very calm, so reasonable. He's very funny. He's good company. He's just got a really great persona that is such a great compliment for the leadership of Donald Trump. And that's the key point. He's not trying to outcompete Donald Trump. He's not trying to be the big guy in the relationship. He understands that his role is to help deliver the president's agenda, and he's proud to do it. He's got a humility about him. He's got an understanding of what is expected of him, not just by the president, but by the party. The party is lockstep behind Donald Trump. They expect Congress to deliver for Donald Trump. And Speaker Johnson understands that, and he goes about it in a way that is really impressive and reasonable. There's another point, which is the fact that he's such an unlikely speaker. The fact that he hasn't been around for years in leadership, I think makes his job more achievable for him, because he hasn't built up all the kind of resentments and factionalism that you've seen perhaps with other people in that position, and he's managing to herd the cats in an incredibly impressive way, actually with smaller of a margin than McCarthy had or Pelosi. Everyone talks about as being great at delivering votes. Speaker Johnson is better than all of them. It's very, very impressive, and it's wonderful to see.
We're speaking with Steve Hilton, who you can follow on X at Steve Hilton X. Steve, the state of California did not vote for Donald Trump in the last election. They did not vote for Donald Trump in 2020 or 2016. However, when you look at what's going on in the country right now, and you went through a partial list of the accomplishments coming out of Washington, D.C. right now, as you sit here and you examine each one of those individually, you say to yourself, no state in the union is going to benefit more from these accomplishments than the state of California. Let's take the stock market, for example. The stock market is cooking right now, and all indications are that it's going to continue to cook. As the jobs are going in the right direction, it looks like he's putting a lot of pressure on the feds to lower the interest rates. You look at the big, beautiful bill passing. Wall Street certainly responds well to that. In the state of California, our budget is largely dependent on people at the top. Rich people, people in the Bay Area, people on the west side of Los Angeles doing very well on the stock market, because when they do, they pay capital gains taxes that go to Sacramento, and they just make it rain. When the stock market is down, when the stock market is not having a good time, the state of California is broke because no one's selling their stocks, no one's paying capital gains taxes. Well, right now, because everyone's making money, the state of California should expect more money to roll in than they previously anticipated. So even though Gavin Newsom might be one of the biggest critics of Donald Trump out there, what Donald Trump is doing right now is going to help the California budget crisis and might help Gavin Newsom get that budget back on track.
Exactly. And that's what's so ridiculous about this pathetic position that Newsom's now taking after, lurching around thinking what's his positioning for what he's obviously interested in, which is not California, but his own personal position in terms of running for president. First, he tried being a moderate and said, oh, no, I'm not a lefty anymore. And then I'm going to try working with President Trump. Now he's given up and he's bashing Trump nonstop, firing off pathetic nuisance lawsuits against President Trump, against Jesse Waters, on and on. But in the end, what he doesn't understand is that the only thing that's actually helping us in California are these federal policies. You could look at that right across the board. So, for example, you had Newsom this week trying to do he did a press conference to distract from gas prices going up. He was up in the Sierras doing something on wildfires. It's actually the president who put out an executive order on forest management, which had basically all the sensible things you'd want to do, helping to manage the fire risk in the forest from the federal position. And then Newsom jumping around saying, oh, he's going to, pretending that it's his idea all along. Same with the gas prices. Across the country, gas prices are going down, the lowest they've been in 4 years for this July the 4th weekend. Of course, here in California, they're going up because of the gas tax increase and the low carbon fuel standard increase that was pushed up this week. But it'd be even higher if it wasn't for what President Trump has done to unleash American oil production, not here in California, but across the country. Everywhere you look, the only good news in terms of policy for Californians is coming from the federal government. But my point is, imagine how great it will be for our state when you have a governor elected in 2026, and this is, of course, my plan, who will work with the president and his administration to get things done for California instead of constantly fighting them, which is what we get now.
Well, and then you look at, for example, the border now being secured. The border has been wide open for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden border crossings are essentially at zero. Not only does that prevent people from coming in here who aren't supposed to be here, but you look at the fentanyl crisis in California with so much of that poison coming in from the southern border. If all of a sudden you have control over your southern border, sure, you don't have access to, or you don't have complete control over what's coming in through the airports or what's coming in through the ports, and certainly we have to re-examine what we're doing there. But having control over that southern border is going to help out the state of California from their people getting addicted to fentanyl.
Exactly. And again, they can't bring themselves to show any kind of support or appreciation for that, or just thank you, President Trump, for dealing with this situation that has for years been overwhelming us in California in terms of whether that's kids in the schools or the hospitals, healthcare, the clinics, not to mention homelessness and all the other things, and the depressing effect on the labor market and wages, all these other consequences of uncontrolled immigration. Now, the flow of that, the increase in that, has been completely stopped in its tracks by what President Trump has done. Instead, all they're doing is endlessly exploiting it for political reasons by going on about the immigration enforcement. So they're just so partisan. And what they can't understand, it really made me laugh when you see the Democrats, the way they were talking about the bill that was just passed today, going on about how it's going to hurt poor people and whatever. What are they talking about? The people in the places in the country where people are suffering the most from poverty, where people are the most hard-pressed financially, are all the places run by Democrats. Here in California, we have the highest poverty in the country thanks to Democrat policies. So their record is such a disaster. All they can do is constantly criticize President Trump. But I think people are seeing through it now.
Last question before you go. Kamala Harris has still not decided if she's going to run for governor. However, this week, former Orange County Congresswoman and candidate for governor, Katie Porter, came out and said that she doesn't care what Kamala Harris is going to do. She's going to be a candidate for governor, and she's not dropping out. Do you think that's an indication that some of the Democratic candidates for governor don't think Kamala Harris is as strong as she thinks she is?
100%. And she's fading all the time. And she's just, this whole attitude that she's had, this arrogant, queenly sort of, I'll just, lounge around by the pool all summer and I'll let you know at the end of the summer how I'm feeling about it. They're fed up with it. All these people, whatever you think of them, they're out there, they're campaigning, they're raising money, they're doing it. And so they're saying, and it's not just Katie Porter, Villaraigosa has said that, Becerra, I believe, has said that, and they're saying, no, we're not just, going to step down and make way for you. Who do you think you are? The support for her seems to be fading all the time. She didn't even bother showing up at the California Democratic Party convention. You got a lot of rumbling around that, like, who does she think she is? Couldn't even be bothered to come here to show support. So I think that her chances, whatever chances she had, are getting slimmer all the time. And my sense is she's not even going to go for it because she knows that she's going to have a fight, even for the nomination, let alone to win the governorship. And she doesn't want to get involved in that. She can't be bothered. She just wants to be relevant. She wants to be in the news. So I suspect what she's going to do is keep her options open and try somehow to persuade people that she's a viable candidate for president again in 2028.
Steve Hilton, founder of Golden Together and candidate for governor here in the state of California. You can get him online at goldentogether.com and follow him on X at Steve Hilton X. Steve, have a great July 4th weekend, and we'll speak again real soon.
And you. Thanks, John. See you soon.
It's the John Phillips Show.